Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy. This is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week we're watching Season 2, Episode 12, Fire Plus Water. It is a Charlie episode.
We've also got an interview. I made a mistake at the end of last week's episode, and I apologize. We are actually talking this week with Rick Romer, who worked as a set decorator on the first couple of seasons of Lost. That means he was responsible for, quite literally, decorating the set.
We heard from Rick earlier this year. He told us about doing the hatch, doing the plane crash. This week we're going to talk to him about some of the later sets he did, things like Ben's house, some other interesting experiences behind the scenes. So let's get to it. As you know, on The Hatch, we always start with our hot takes about this week's episode. Rosie, what is your hot take?
So mine is pretty dumb, and I have been thinking about this all season. In this episode, we get a shot of Jack kindly helping Ana Lucia set up a new tent for herself. Where do they get all of these tarps? There are like 70 tarps on this beach. Were they on the plane? Did they just find them in the hatch? Who the hell has this many tarps and never runs out of them? We have one tarp in my house, and I know that because it's leaf raking season here in Akron, Ohio. And it is like already torn to shreds just from like raking the leaves. I mean, it was torn to shreds before that actually, so that's not true. But I want to know where they got all those damn tarps. That's my take.
I'm going to Google, do airplanes have lots of tarps, and see what comes up. Do airplanes have lots of tarps? The first thing that comes up is a Reddit post on the Lost subreddit. What's
God
with all
bless
the
you,
tarps?
Lost.
What's with all the tarps? This is from 2012.
I love Lost fans. I love you, Lost fans.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, I love the show, watching it for the third time, but where the hell did all the tarps come from? They seem to respawn every time someone needs a new shelter. Is there a tarp growing tree we don't know about?
That's what I'm saying. Does somebody know how to like weave them? I don't know. Anyway, a lot of other things to be mad about in this episode, Sammy. What is your hot
so
take?
many things to be mad about. I am going to ingloriously launch us into the Charlie discussion here with my hot take, which is a hot take I feel real bad about, but I'm just going to say it. Charlie's backstory, as a whole on the show, is just not that interesting. I feel, it's not that it's not a moving backstory and that there's not, real pathos and tragedy to it. It's just, I just find it kind of boring. He and his, it's sort of a cliched story almost. He and his brother started a band, got famous, used drugs, ruined their lives. And that's like the theme of every Charlie flashback. And it's really hard to watch every time. And it's all kind of hitting the same note, and I'm just not that interested in it. Especially after, like, some sort of curious hints this episode about, like, Charlie and Liam's relationship with their father, who it's kind of, like, hinted at, maybe he wanted them to, go into a sort of typical profession. He was a butcher, it seems like. But that's just not explored really at all in any of the Charlie flashbacks, like the kids' relationship with their dad outside of these glancing details. And I feel like that could have been a much more interesting place to go at some point, rather than just every flashback being about and the drugs ruined their lives.
Huh. I don't know that I agree with that, actually.
Okay.
I think Charlie and Liam's relationship is not necessarily one of the most complex relationships on the show. Like, not maybe compared to Echo and Yemi, which is another brother-brother relationship that we see. But it does have its own complexities. And I think where we see that here is, like, Charlie is the younger of the two brothers, and yet is always having to take care of Liam, having to be responsible for Liam, having to corral him into doing stuff. And yet Liam is the one who gets clean. Like, at the time that Charlie gets to the island, Liam is the one who's able to get clean, and Charlie is not. And I think Charlie feels a great deal of shame around that, like, not just because of his addiction, but because he blames Liam for getting into this, and then he kind of blames Liam for getting out of it. I don't think Charlie's backstory is boring. It's not one of my favorites, I'll give you that, but I don't think it's uncomplicated.
Maybe bored is a step too far. Yeah, you don't think it's you think it is. You think there's complexity to it, is what you're saying.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. I'm willing to back down from that hot take if the discussion warrants it.
I'm willing to swoop in. Go ahead.
I'll cut in for 1 second and just say, and despite my take, I do very much enjoy the work of Neil Hopkins here as Liam, Charlie's brother, who, as longtime listeners may recall, was one of our first guests on the Hatch podcast back in the beginning of season 1. So thanks again to to Neil for that. But anyway, you were going to swoop in with something here.
Boy, Charlie really just deserves to get punched in the face by John Locke at the end of the episode. My goodness. Can I just take that stand?
That's a good hot take, too.
Holy cow. Like, I know he has been having visions, and I want to talk about the visions. But my dude, you do not start a fire and then steal a baby and walk it into the ocean. Like, he deserves all of the punching for that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I remember going, I remember the punching scene, and going into this episode, I was kind of dreading it. Just because I thought, why did that storyline happen? But honestly, there was a lot of annoying stuff to watch this episode, but that was one moment I actually felt like, great. Like, yes, Charlie is getting what he deserves here. I'm very glad that Locke just punched him. Yeah.
And Locke is right in a lot of the things he says to Charlie, which I know come off as harsh in this episode, but where he says, like, you don't deserve to be trusted. And you've lied and lied again. And, you said, you told Claire that you didn't know what was in the statue when you did. You told me you destroyed everything. And here I've just found you in the woods with a stash in these trees. Like, even if Charlie is not using, he is lying a lot. And maybe that's habit, because we see that in the flashbacks when we see Charlie living with his addiction. Lying to that girl he dates briefly, lying primarily because he's ashamed or because he doesn't want people to know. And now, even
we see him lie to Liam's wife this episode as well.
Right. And even though he himself is not using on the island, he's still practicing those habits, which is interesting.
It is. He does. I think that's a really good point. It seems like he doesn't know how to live a different way. And frankly, even though I think that we're perhaps supposed to believe after the final scene with Jack that he really wasn't using this whole time.
I know what this looks like. What people think. It doesn't matter now, but I didn't use. I wanted to. I really wanted to. But I didn't.
I still don't know that I buy it. Like, in a weird way, even if that was perhaps the writer's intention to leave that implication, like, after all the lies he tells this episode, and after how creepy he acts with Claire and with Aaron, and especially with the visions, I quote unquote visions, the weird nightmarish dreams, and he's sweating the whole time. Like, I find it still pretty hard to believe that he's not using here. I kind of think that he's still trying to pull one over on us as the audience, even at the end.
Oh, that's really interesting. I always took him at his word.
I want to, but I don't know.
No, you make good points, because
I feel like Locke here. I don't think he even deserves that from us, even if the writers kind of intend that.
Yeah, well, because I was wondering about what you think about the visions, because the island does give people visions.
This is true.
The island does show people stuff. But Charlie's seem to be a little bit more like hallucinations. And I'm thinking specifically when he's seeing Claire and his mom on the beach as like angels, or as the Virgin Mary and somebody or something. And then Hurley comes out of the woods like dressed in period garb, and but it's actually Hurley coming out of the woods. Like, that seemed very much like a hallucination to me, and not an island-inspired vision, such as Kate's horse. And that would explain a lot. I've honestly never considered that he was still using through this episode, which is, or at least, I guess your timeline here would suppose that after Echo gifts him that statue, when they go to find the plane,
right? Yeah,
he starts up again then, because he definitely did stop with John Locke when he destroyed what he thought was the last of it.
Yes, that's my thinking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so he's only been using for like a week or...
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously open to interpretation, right? Like, right. I know I'm choosing to interpret it that way.
Right.
But I think
it's an interesting...
But I think it speaks to what you were saying before, which is that Charlie totally deserves everything that he gets this episode. The harsh advice from Locke, the total rejection by Claire, the beatdown at the end. I mean, it's a cringe-worthy episode. It's really hard to watch Charlie throughout this episode as he just continues to lie and make a fool of himself and make Claire upset. Like, there's really nothing redeeming about Charlie's actions here at all that I can see.
No, and he's so horribly self-centered, like, in his approach to Claire and Aaron. Like, he just keeps, like, running up to her in a panic and saying, he's in danger, I have to save him, after Claire already had multiple, like, big scares for her baby, both, at the hands of Rousseau and at, they're coming to take the boy. Like, Claire has been protecting this baby for a couple of months, and like,
yeah,
if Charlie cares about her, he should know that, and he should be able to act with that in mind. But I guess we haven't seen a ton of evidence that Charlie is a particularly generous friend, e.g. in our conversations about Charlie and Hurley.
Yeah, I've just been thinking that we have not been too kind on Charlie overall. And my opinion of him is diminishing as our podcast goes on here.
Yeah, mine too. That makes me a little sad because he was one of my favorites.
And poor Claire. Charlie, to go on what you said. I mean, Charlie was like the one person, one of the few people she felt like she could really trust and be comfortable with, and who was there for her. And now she totally can't trust him at all. It's right. I mean, it's just it makes a bad situation for her even worse.
Right. Well, and she's so clear with him, like, I don't want you near my baby. And he just continues to violate that, like, time and time again. And just, that has got to be terrible. And I feel for Claire.
I didn't dislike this episode as much as I thought I would. It's not my favorite. I think mostly my personal distaste for it was just because it's so difficult to watch Charlie just being so awful the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm still a little hung up on just wishing there was more in Charlie's backstory to help.
Yeah.
To help explain who he is here, like the whole thing. I mean, in addition to just these weird hints at his relationship with his father that are never explored, there's also the dream sequence at the beginning where his mom says that he's going to save the family by becoming a famous musician, presumably making a lot of money.
Right.
Like it just seems to, and that's just something that, as far as I can recall, never comes back up. And I just feel like there's so much interesting ground to tap in how Charlie and Liam ended up going down that road, and what the relationship was like with the family, and what it might have meant to the family if they had sort of stayed clean and been quote unquote good sons and good brothers to each other. Like I feel like there's more there with Charlie that I want to know that would help me understand him and explain why he does these kinds of things. And does that make more sense than my hot take did? I think I articulated it better that time.
It does. Yeah, you've formed the thought a little better, I think.
Okay, yeah.
And even going back a couple of Charlie episodes to the one where he first uses, the reason he uses is kind of just because Liam tells him, like, yeah, sorry, this is all there is, everything sucks. And Charlie's like, yeah, it does.
But how did they get to that point?
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of effort to get us to a point where we're thrilled to see Charlie and Claire together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the end of season 3. I mean, hugely powerful episode.
Yeah.
Of course, Through the Looking Glass. But we got a long way to go. We got a lot of ground to cover before we get to that.
We do.
So a lot will change.
I'm sure we'll I don't know if we'll love Charlie again by that point, but I hope we respect him more by then. I think that's the job the show has to do at this point.
And I think this is kind of the nadir for Charlie. I think it's all up from here.
No.
Oh no, what am I forgetting?
So I'll count this as my hindsight because I didn't have one. Next comes the part where Charlie attacks Sun in her garden and tries to it's something where he attacks Sun as a plot to embarrass Locke, and it gets worse. So I'm sorry.
I forgot about that. Crap. Okay.
Yeah.
I take it back.
Obviously there are many Lost fans who love Charlie. If you are very upset with our discussion of him, if you disagree, if you want to try to tell us what we're missing here and how sympathetic we should be to Charlie right now, please let us know. Tweet at us at The Hatch Podcast. Come find us on Facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
Yeah, and on that note, we did hear from many of you last week when we talked about Jack on the hunting party. We're recording this just about 15 hours after we released this episode, so we probably have only heard from a handful of you. But Sammy, did you want to share some of those comments?
Yeah, so we every time we criticize Jack, and especially when we show our Kate and Sawyer true colors here, we hear from folks who disagree with us, and so we heard from a Twitter user at Cellardor815 who goes by Bravest Girl on Earth on Twitter. And she made the point here, we were talking last episode about why Jack not letting Kate come along with the hunting party for Michael. And she writes, the reason Jack doesn't want Kate to come along is because he doesn't want the drama and distraction. She had kissed him and run, and they hadn't even had a chance to talk about it. He's frustrated and doesn't need Kate triangle issues. Also, Sawyer had no idea Kate had kissed Jack. When he told her he would have let her come along, Sawyer doesn't know the context of why Jack doesn't want her along. Compare Sawyer's attitude towards Kate in the finale of season 3, where he refuses to let her come along. So I thought that was an interesting commentary.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point because we did not mention at all that, indeed, the last time we saw Jack and Kate was their very emotionally fraught kiss. However, this is just so consistent with what Jack has done in the past that I'm not sure he wouldn't have done it anyway. And we have no way of knowing, of course. But my feeling is that he probably would have done the same thing. Sans kiss.
I tend to agree with you, and I also think that even if that is all that's going on, and he just doesn't want the triangle issues here and the drama of what happened with him and Kate, I still don't know that's an especially good reason, or I guess I still don't know that I support that it's okay for Jack to say, okay, well, we have this relationship drama happening, so Kate can't join us. Mm-hmm. You made the point last week that Kate is probably better with a gun than any of them, and is a good tracker, and could be a real contributor to this mission. So if what's happening here is Jack is letting his personal feelings get in the way, and and either way, he's still kind of taking the decision out of Kate's hands, which I don't love.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair read of the situation, but for me as well, I don't know that it I don't know that it makes things necessarily okay for me. We also got a comment on Facebook from Monica Emerson, another frequent listener and frequent commenter on our thoughts on Jack and Kate on the show. And Monica, who listened to the episode, wrote here, just as an FYI, Jack and Sarah's marriage was very brief, lasting somewhere between a few months to under a year. So while Jack was working a lot, Sarah didn't give the marriage much of a chance either before she embarked on an affair. Ultimately, I don't think they either truly loved each other. Jack seemed to have more of a work-life balance when he was with Kate, when they get off the island, I assume, presumably because he loved her and learned from his failed marriage. And then she also points out here... Oh, no, this is another commenter. Excuse me. This is Eric Trobeck in response to Monica, who says, I think Jack even points out in Do No Harm that he's not sure if he's marrying her for the right reasons, which is true. That is that conversation Jack has with his dad.
Yeah, no, Monica makes a very good point. Like, Sarah does tell Jack, I'm leaving you, and it's because I've already been seeing someone else. And that is not great. um, so that did not come up in our discussion last week. And they both make a good point in pointing out that Jack was not sure about this marriage anyway, and he expressed that, and it was quite short. And I think we talked about this in Do No Harm or in another previous Jack episode, where perhaps what drove Jack to marry Sarah in the first place was the fact that he saved her. And he just kind of thought, like, well, that's kind of the logical extension of my feelings for this person who I saved, instead of sort of being able to put those in two different buckets. But no, that's a very good point, and it does seem like the dissolution of that marriage was mutual.
Yeah, and possibly preordained.
Yeah.
Should we go on to the interview?
I think so. So again, Sam, we are playing a little bit more from Sammy's conversation with Rick Romer, set decorator. All right, let's play it.
What were some of the, we talked about the plane crash, we talked about the hatch. What were were there others, what would be some of the other sets that you would, point to as like, oh, that was a set that, was fun to work on or that you were proud of, where you felt like you made did some good work?
The biggest, and this was first season, first production designer who was actually, we became friends, which I don't normally do with work type people. We were doing a set. It was supposed to be Australia. It was supposed to be, I want to say Claire's astrologer's house, or anyway, the information.
That was the psychic. Tool that you get on the phone.
The information I got was complete wacko. Interested in all forms of religion, never threw anything out, piles of newspapers, and the fact that we were filming it in a historic bed and breakfast that was all Victorian and sliding pocket doors and brass chandeliers and things. I did this set, which I have to say I kind of specialize in clutter and craziness and Victorian whatever, so I really did it up, and we cleverly covered the woman's drapes and things with our own, so that it would be easy to wrap out of there and not have to redo all of her stuff. So anyway, I did the set, and this has never happened before or since. I get a call from one of the producers saying, "Oh my God, that is the most incredible set I've ever seen. You've outdone yourself. This is fabulous," which I also should have realized was the kiss of death, but at the time it seemed like a really great thing to hear. And the director came in that morning, and again, very seldom happens, raved. I was like just soaking it up. And so I just kind of hung around. I don't normally hang around after the director accepts the set, but I was like, "Oh, excuse me, have you told me how fabulous my set is?" Oh. So then it was like, okay, I got to get out of here and on to the next one. So I left feeling pretty good, and I got ways away, and I got a call from Jack Bender's assistant, and which probably wasn't. I thought, well, maybe he's going to tell me what a great set it was, which would never have happened anyway. But anyway, that was not the case. So he said, I remember his exact words. Doesn't say hello or anything. He just said, "What were you thinking?" And I said, "Oh, what was I thinking about? What, Jack?" And he said, "The set." And he said, "Who told you? Who told you to do that?" I said, "Well, I don't want to say his name, but the production designer." And he said, "Well, it's wrong." And he just screamed. And he said, "And I want it out now. This guy is a professor. It's modern. It's chrome. It's glass. It's minimalist. It's like, well, it was the complete opposite of what we had done. So, whoops. And so he says, "And I want it now." So luckily I have a good reputation and know people here in town, and I got the store that would have had all the chrome and glass and modern stuff that they opened early for me. I had the truck there. We had $60,000 worth of stuff in that truck in half an hour. I didn't even sign for anything. I said, "Okay, you'll get it back. Don't worry." and we drove off, and then they were filming outside first. The company hadn't moved in yet. And not only all of our dressing, but all of the woman's dressing, including her drapes and her whatever, had been taken down by PAs or crew people or somebody and just piled in the backyard. Luckily, it didn't rain. And we had this bare bones set, and we brought in our chrome and glass and minimalist stuff and put it down. And Mr. Bender loved it, and the director was crying.
All right, because everyone else had liked what you had done before. That
was not the point, and that's why you have showrunners. They are the vision, and I mean, it was perfectly within his rights. And this is what happens sometimes when you have production designers who don't. Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. I shouldn't put any blame for anything, but it wasn't the first time that happened. But that was by far the worst time that had happened, and. Luckily, I got lots of pictures of the set before, and I didn't take any pictures of the set after because that was so that was a pretty scary thing. But in the end, Jack was happy, and that's what we're there to do. And it was just a different interpretation that hadn't gotten expressed, and either one would have worked, but it was. When somebody's in charge of the show, and that means everything from the script to the set to the, what kind of hairstyle they have, it's important that, somebody has to be in charge. And
one of my favorites was always the Others Village where they live, which I just, I love how weird it is that there's this, Pleasantville kind of, suburban community. Well, I'm super curious what that was like to work on, and sort of what your thought process was going into making that.
It's odd. It's an actual place called Camp Erdman, and it's a YM or YMCA camp out not too far from where we shot the plane crash, the beach scene. It's the same area, Mokulāʻia, and those cabins they painted them that sort of awful gold color. I guess that was supposedly the color from the era. And but we really never shot anything inside. They're just very rustic bunk bed interiors. I think we put curtains in the windows or something. But did they ever show inside those? I don't think so.
There were scenes that were supposed to be taking place in people's houses.
Yeah, I think that those probably would have all been done on the stage because it was an operating camp, and I don't know how we worked it, if they had actual guests staying there or if we just rented it and kicked everybody out, or how it worked. But and that was a great location because there was a kind of a oddly it's very stark and very kind of minimal and. You could almost imagine it being what it was supposed to be, which is not a YMCA camp. But
you told me before we got to talking about the Others Village. You told me before we started recording. One of the last things you did was Ben's house, right? Yeah.
That was really interesting because I actually had bought furniture. I think Ben's furniture, in fact, the Others furniture. I remember. Talk about multitasking. I was driving on the freeway, holding a credit card in one hand and my cell phone in the other, and somehow the wheel, and ordered the furniture, I think in August or something. And then we paid a fortune to get it shipped there in 3 days, and then it sat for 3 months because we were going to see into their houses, and then we never did. So finally. They said we're going to see into Ben's house, or Ben or Henry, his name was. I guess it wound up being Ben, wasn't it? Or wasn't he a Henry at one point?
Originally he was Henry Gale, but then it turns out his name is Ben.
Oh, okay. So we'll call him Ben then. That we were going to see into Ben's house, but not to worry because they didn't want any evidence of any personality, no photos, no. Collections, just totally blank slate. That we would he would still remain a mystery man. We would learn nothing from his interior. So I thought, okay, well, got that covered. I already got the furniture, and I know I'll never forget. It was the Tuesday before our Christmas hiatus for 2 weeks, and I got this phone call saying, "You've got to get back to the studio right away. There's been big changes." We see in Ben's house, but we see his African mask collection, his butterfly. We see a portrait of his mother. We see that's been painted. We see his whole life history on display inside his house. And it's Tuesday, and we're off for 2 weeks and 3 days, and we're coming back. Me and my crew were going to have, I think, 2 days to put it together, and then they were going to film it, first up Monday morning after the break. And that kind of threw me a little bit. So those were my orders, to have him have a complete history, no additional information given, and have it ready for filming first day, 6 a.m. after the break. So I spent the whole Christmas vacation and shopped, ordered, bought off eBay, got an entire history for Henry with very little information other than butterflies and African masks, and they only go so far. We got somebody to paint the portrait of a woman they hired to sit for the portrait, and then I had it framed. So I really knocked myself out, and nobody came in to see what I had done. No producer, production designer, art director, anybody. Nobody came in the whole time. Me and my crew were there putting the set together. I think it was the Saturday and Sunday before filming on Monday, which I thought was really odd because it was really a pretty important set, and it's not like they didn't come by and check on us other times just to make sure things were going okay. And I didn't get approval on anything. I didn't send any photos. Like, do you like this mask, or do you like this mask? Are these butterflies okay? Are they too colorful? Do you want? No, I just I did the thing. It was interesting, and Jack came in, and he didn't change one single thing. I think he moved one mask about 6 inches over so it would be on camera better, but nothing was said, nothing was changed. Everything was perfect as far as I could tell, because if it wasn't, I would have heard about it. He had no problem throwing everything out on somebody's lawn if he didn't like it. So I was very proud of that, and I was proud of my professionalism, and I was proud that I saw it through. I wasn't proud that I screwed up my Christmas, but I did what I had to do, and that was it. I'll tell you another little secret we did on one show. It was Kate was in Australia. She was riding in somebody's truck. I don't remember exactly what the.
Oh, was this when the farmer that she was living with was supposedly taking her to the airport, but he was really turning her into the police? Oh,
okay. Maybe that was.
I'm thinking of Kate in a truck. Maybe it's a different time. But anyway, go on.
Well, what was interesting is, and we had this problem before with driving in Australia because they're on the other side of the road, and this, seeing it out a window like we did from that police set we did, and the travel agency, they always chose one-way street, so it didn't matter which side of the road they were driving on, and then just hope that people didn't notice that all the steering wheels were on the left side rather than on the right. So anyway, the problem was, where are they going to find a period pickup truck that had the steering wheel on the right and everything? So this was really clever. They flipped to the negative, and the show that was one of the last shows to still be filmed in film, and
as opposed to digital, you mean?
As the digital, which truthfully probably would have been even easier digital. But the actor had to part his hair on the other side. He had to put his watch on his other hand, and we had danger kangaroo crossing signs made backwards. The license plates were made backwards, and basically everything was physically reversed on the car, so that when they flipped to the negative, now the steering wheel is on the correct side for Australia, and his hair parted matched his hair parted prior to driving in the truck scene. So that was an interesting thing to do because, again, didn't necessarily have that much to do with set dressing. But I enjoyed watching that, knowing that, wow, it looks just perfect. And the fact that they were driving on it was an old pineapple road out in the middle of nowhere. You really couldn't see, but all the road signs looked fine. The license plate was fine. The watch was on the correct hand. I mean, but it was all reversed for that scene.
I love knowing that Camp Other was a YMCA camp or YWCA camp. I think that makes perfect sense. Like now when I look back I Googled a few, just Google imaged those homes, and they do look exactly like those like bunkhouses at camps like that.
It's hilarious.
That's a real treat to me.
By the way, that reminds me also that I saw that Bobby Moynihan, the I think former SNL cast member now, he tweeted the other day that he owns the fish snack bear treat dispenser from the cages, the fish crackers.
What a weird thing to own.
I don't know the backstory on how he acquired it, but anyway, that's one of my favorite
hilarious
things right now. On a more serious note, I thought it was interesting that I guess the idea for Ben's house, that the original direction was show no personality here, and then suddenly it was switched to like butterflies and African masks, and he's like a safari adventurer. So I just it makes me wonder what the development of his backstory was like, that they suddenly flipped it on his head and decided they were going to let him have personality.
Right. Well, the adventurer does make a lot more sense with the things we start to see in what I think is season 4, when Ben goes back to the real world and is interacting with first when he shows up to see Widmore, but also when he's in Tunisia for a bit, he's in Iraq for Nadia's funeral. Like,
yeah,
that is consistent with butterflies and masks. Well, that'll wrap us up for this week. Thank you as always for tuning in. It has been a pleasure. We will see you next week to discuss The Long Con. I am so excited. Y'all know we love talking about Sawyer.
We do love talking about Sawyer. We're going to have a bit more as well, one last segment from our interview with Rick Romer. And then after that, we're going to start to get into some of the Ben stuff over the next few weeks and hear from Michael Emerson.
Oh, I'm so excited for that. In the meantime, please do come chat with us. We are on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast, on Facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast. And if you want, you can also call us and leave us a voicemail at 9546-DHARMA.
Yes, that is a place where you can leave us a message and we might play it on the show. Important things, our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
See you next week.
Namaste.